Alrighty, I'll be honest, as I always try to be. I'm not exactly sure what to make of these Pentagon leaks. I am not. I mean, I think they're authentic, but I'm not sure how to interpret them directly. I am relying, which I don't like to do, on other people's interpretations of what these documents mean. Not only that, I have not been able to locate a good source that just has all the documents in one place. They're scattered around. I've been seeing them like on Twitter and stuff, and certain articles will reference them and they'll have them. What appears to have happened is someone inside the Pentagon had a bunch of these classified documents that they were looking at, and they decided to take pictures of them with their phone and put them out on Discord. It seems to be, I can't remember what Discord server it was, but there was a Discord server that these appeared to have first showed up on, and then they just started making the rounds. And some people are dismissing it because they confirm things that people like me, feel like we already knew. Like, oh yeah, there's special operations troops, boots on the ground in Ukraine, American soldiers fighting in the war against Russia. That is confirmed by these documents. But that's not something that was really admitted openly. It's not like the Pentagon acknowledges that they have troops fighting over in Ukraine, and that NATO in general. I mean, there's about 100 NATO soldiers, I would imagine special operations guys, over in Ukraine doing the whole, advising thing, i.e. picking targets and helping the Ukrainians actually use all these weapons we've been sending them that the Ukrainians are not trained on how to use. The U.S. is as involved in the Ukraine war, if not more, than they were in the war in Yemen. And I think, people on this corner of the internet are perfectly capable of admitting that the war in Yemen was the U.S.'s war. That was America's war. The war in Ukraine, also America's war. Americans are fighting it. And there's lots of other stuff in this that is not surprising to me. In fact, there's nothing that I've seen. And I'll link to a Zero Hedge article which tries to summarize these documents, but I think it'll take some time before we really, because honestly, I looked at a couple of them, and I was never in the military. It looked like Greek to me. I didn't quite understand everything that was, most of actually what was written on these slides, because it's in shorthand, and it's for people who know what all of this means. And I don't. So I'm a little uncomfortable talking about it, but it does need to be addressed. I would be a shill for the regime if I didn't address this at all, and I just ignored it and pretend like they didn't exist. Obviously, some real documents have been leaked, and the regime is very, very upset about it. In fact, what tells me that these documents are in fact important and that these leaks deserve being discussed is that the so-called OSINT community, which exposed itself for all the world to see pretty much when the Ukraine war started as nothing but a product of the Pentagon. They are a Pentagon op. Anyone who uses the hashtag OSINT, open source intelligence, these are just pro-US regime toadies. That's all these people are. And that's why they're not interested in what these documents say and what might be true about them, because, hey, guess what? Now this is open source intelligence. It's out there. Anyone can get it. It's on the internet. They should be analyzing it and trying to think about, what does this mean for the war? No, they're very upset that this came out, and they want whoever leaked this to be, thrown in prison, life in prison, executed for treason. And so when I see regime loyalists, propaganda artists, talking like that, that tells me that these leaks matter and that they need to be discussed and they need to be brought up, even if I don't fully understand why they're so upset yet. Now, it might just be that they're upset that any documents at all got leaked, okay? On the other hand, they might be upset because while this is stuff that doesn't seem revolutionary to me, to the average American or the average citizen in the West, in a NATO country or in a U.S. allied country, these leaks might really change their perspective. Not only are there U.S. troops and other NATO troops currently in Ukraine, the U.S. has been spying on Zelensky and trying to track his every move. Again, something not surprising to me. I would expect them to do that, but to some people that might seem like quite the revelation. The U.S. was also spying on South Korea, trying to dig up dirt on South Korea to use as leverage so that they could extort the South Koreans and force them to give arms to Ukraine. South Korea is not very happy about that right now. They saw that leak and they said, you know what, America, that's not cool. There's already a pretty strong anti-American movement in South Korea. They don't feel safe having the U.S. troops there. They feel like they are put in danger by having the U.S. troops there. They don't feel like the Americans are defending them. They feel like the Americans are painting a target on their backs. And this is only going to further that sentiment. Additionally, part of these leaks said that the Ukrainians have lost about 71,000 troops in the war. They've suffered 71,000 casualties. To me, that doesn't sound far-fetched. That sounds reasonable. And it also said that Russia has only suffered 17,000, give or take, 17,500, I think is what it showed. Again, something that would not be surprising to me. It seems like the Ukrainian strategy is to throw meat into the grinder, and the Russian strategy is to hang back and just keep turning the grinder and keep up the pressure. And so, while I didn't know by what factor the disparity existed, I was already of the impression that the Ukrainians, just by the nature of this war has been going, have been losing a lot more people than the Russians. But this is not very good for the narrative, even though, again, this is not stuff that surprises me. For the ordinary person, they might be surprised to hear this. Even though I don't think there's very many people who are still towing the Ukraine is winning line. Nobody's really saying that anymore. They're just saying, well, we can't just give up, as if MSNBC viewers have the right to dictate the fates of poor Ukrainian people who are going to be drafted into this losing war. I mean, it's like Lindsey Graham yesterday on, Meet the Press or something. On Easter Sunday, Lindsey Graham's talking about how we have to launch a preemptive strike against China. We have to blockade China before China blockades Taiwan. We need to cut off China's oil. I mean, it's like, have you opened a history book, Lindsey? Aren't you so old? Don't you remember World War II? Don't you remember how that started? It was because FDR blockaded Japan's oil. He cut off their oil. And Japan said, well, then, gee, we're going to have to invade a country that has oil if we're going to continue as a society. And the closest place was the Dutch East Indies, but the Japanese couldn't make it there. They needed a forward operating base, and that's where the Philippines came in. The Japanese went to war with the United States to secure the Philippines as an airstrip so that they could attack the Dutch East Indies and get the oil there, because the U.S. cut off Japan's oil. That's the only reason why the U.S. was involved in World War II. The Second World War was a war for oil when it comes to the U.S. and Japan. And we wouldn't have gotten into the war if it weren't for Japan. But we would have never been attacked by Japan if the U.S. did not launch an economic first strike, the likes of which Lindsey Graham wants to repeat. And I didn't want to make this video about Lindsey Graham and China. In fact, I probably should save it and talk about it tomorrow. I should be focused and just stick to the Pentagon leaks for today. Lindsey Graham's stuff is so insane, I need to go through that in its own video. So back to these leaks. Another thing that came up, I think, was that it was the Ukrainian military that launched a terror attack inside of Belarus not too long ago. It wasn't a quote-unquote pro-Ukrainian group. What this shows is that every time you hear the media talk about some quote-unquote, pro-Ukrainian group that totally was not government affiliated, that's just Ukrainian intelligence doing that. and that the U.S. is actually worried about the Ukrainians being too aggressive towards Russia and extending the war, into Russian territory. And I have to say, I'm actually happy to see that the Pentagon, that there is a line for the Pentagon that they would rather not cross. That they do think there's a limit to what we should be involved with in Ukraine. And the Pentagon seems to be pretty clear. They do not want their name attached. They don't want to be associated with attacks on the Russian interior, which I think is reasonable. I'm glad they at least draw a line somewhere. Now, I draw the line much further away from, provoking war with Russia. I would much rather not be involved in any military conflict against another nuclear power. But at least the Pentagon believes in showing some restraint. And they do want to keep their little pet Zelensky on a leash to a certain extent. Now, somewhere I heard someone say that this was the most damaging leak since Edward Snowden. I wish that were the case. Now, it might just be that we've been on a dry spell as far as leaks go. Maybe this is the most significant leak we've had since then. It's hard for me to imagine because this doesn't seem like that bad of a leak. I mean, it's a lot of stuff, but doesn't seem super consequential. So to sum things up, I'm not sure what impact this will have. I want to see more. I want to see this work its way into the zeitgeist a bit more. It's taken some days to really trickle because I think the stuff that got leaked, it seems a bit opaque. And I think that's why it's taking time for it to be processed and to really be disseminated. And as that happens, I'm hoping maybe tonight the Tuckster might get into it, since he has the biggest platform in America. That's why he matters. It's not that I care about him in particular, and that I think he's a great wonderful person or whatever. In fact, I really didn't like Tucker Carlson when he first got this job, but he's used his platform well and shines lights on important topics at important times. So I would like to see his resources be put into something like this, and to really expose us to a broader audience of people who, because I'm in my bubble I follow this stuff fairly closely. This stuff just didn't seem like a shocker to me. I think if the information in these documents was injected into the minds of the average American, I think that would have a significant effect on public opinion. It would bring people much closer to the way that I think and that others think. So with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow, and I will try and get to discussing Lindsey Graham in China. So with that said, bye-bye.